Consciousness 2, what it's like. In the video titled Consciousness 1, I suggested how life could have begun. Then I suggested how mind began. Chromosomes, the long RNA or DNA molecules in each cell, continued to write new intelligence into themselves in the form of models of how biochemistry worked, of how things went on in the environment, of better ways to grow from one cell to two. Eventually, impressions from these models could join up to constitute if questions. This was new. Asking if that couldn't happen in a purely physical, determined world prompted into existence the present moment, a new kind of time stretching forward from the present just 1 second long. These two kinds of time were entirely different. In the present moment, the laws of physics didn't apply. Instead, it was where mind could exist. But although they were entirely different, regular physical time and this new mental moment of time could interact to change one another. Each creature's mental moment started out blank, but by lasting for a second or two, it gave a chromosome an opportunity to pose if questions and refer to its models for answers. Chromosomes created along themselves new model memory space where they could store present moment activities and relate them. Chromosomes began to think. Here I divided chromosomes into two aspects. I called the mental aspect of them genomes. Genomes are chromosomes' minds. This made it easier for me to continue. In Consciousness 1, I talked about how genomes got smarter, eventually conscious, and could embed some of their own mental abilities into the creatures they coded for, into their brains. I ended up describing how our modern consciousness evolved. This video picks up from there. It's about what the present moment is like. What occupies each present moment is mental stuff, made up of meanings. We experience that as thoughts, feelings, what our senses tell us about the outside physical world, and ways we can express our intentions back onto that world. Call these all thoughts. What can we know about the present moment from our own experience of it? It can hold only one thought at a time, but each thought prompts the next into existence, and in an interesting way. Thoughts grow in trains from simple to complex. Thoughts can lead to novelties, such as you'd never find in the purely physical world. A simple sensation can lead through a train of thoughts to a decision that can make something novel happen in the physical world. First, it was genomes that could do this. Meeting some obstacle, they could bring to mind some of the genes their chromosome consisted of to form an if question, and from the following train of thought arrive at a conclusion that they'd store back as changes to their brains, to those genes. But genes are what define a species. So merely by thinking, a genome could bring into existence a new kind of creature. This is how living creatures evolve. A genome embarks on a new train of thought that creates a new species, then its attention may get drawn away. That's why species evolve so rapidly, then may stay the same for millions of years. What connects one thought to another in the present moment, in the genome or in us? I like to call evolutionary processes. That suggests how thinking in the present moment can be creative. This suggests how we humans, while we're conscious in a present moment, can be creative too. Do you want proof of how we, while being creative in a present moment, can create novelties in the physical environment? Think of new kinds of steel bridges you've seen, something that's never existed before. Then think that originated in some engineer's creative present moment. Once you accept that example, you can see endless examples of human creativity all around you. I titled this talk, What Consciousness is Like, but of course it isn't like anything else. So how can we study it? Not by science. Science doesn't have access to present moments. But I suggest we can learn more about it by studying how living creatures have evolved. Here, from what little I know, I've speculated about how living creatures evolve. I suppose that genomes can all read each other's minds. Together, they might form a network of consciousness stretching across all of nature, with separate intelligences at nodes for every instance of life, from entire kingdoms to species to individual creatures to their tissues, their cells. Together, the genomes in a creature could collaborate to manage its entire development, from embryo to adult. How else could all processes in a growing organism proceed on a fixed schedule to a perfectly formed adult? Genomes could bring different kinds of creatures together, as some ant species farm aphids and depend on them for food. Genomes may manage entire communities. For example, ants in colonies are capable of achievements not possible for ants as individuals. And this could explain how complex structures, such as eyes with lenses, appeared at different points in the network, such as among vertebrates, arachnids, and mollusks. I read that crab-like creatures have sprung up at many places among life's kingdoms. Perhaps that's due to some creatures' hyperactive, self-promotional genome. I call my version of dualism evodualism because it can account for both how evolution works and what makes us conscious. How we became conscious, it traces back to how we evolved. Once genomes became conscious, they could know how to build consciousness into us. We don't make ourselves conscious. To account for us becoming conscious, I need call on no religions, no gods. I introduce nothing remotely supernatural except for the present moment that we all know about from our experience. And free will, being aware of having a present moment and of how it can lead us through trains of thought to a decision, that can account for our sense of having free will. Despite our genomes having built some parts of their mental powers into us, they didn't make us able to read their minds. How we experience consciousness is no doubt very different from how they experience it. They didn't even make us able to read each other's minds, except through language. I expect we experience a very particular kind of consciousness designed just for us. We may even differ about it among ourselves. Paleontology and anthropology suggest that we weren't yet conscious when we first evolved. Instead, we came with mental abilities built into us including a capacity for language, along with walking upright with our hands free, from which we could create civilization, out of which consciousness emerged. How it emerged, I proposed in the Consciousness One video drawing on Julian Jaynes' book. Details in the description. It suggests our consciousness is probably still a work in progress. I experience conscious experience to still be very different among South Americans experiencing consciousness first as the Christian soul than it is for Asians influenced first by Confucius and Lao Tse, and Europeans influenced primarily by ancient Greece and Rome. I think we still haven't surveyed our forms of conscious experience. Even among visitors to this channel, a survey shows a sharp break between dualists and physicalists, material monists. See a link to this survey in the description and add your vote. How could we compare conscious experiences? I suggest by comparing our languages. What we get from languages is meanings we can make thoughts out of. We can't talk in terms of how the outside world really is, only in terms of meanings we apply to things. I like to put it this way. We use meanings to cognize things, label them with a meaning, so we'll be able to recognize them when we come across them again. That's what meanings are like. How can we compare the unique structures of meanings each language supports? Perhaps by applying artificial intelligence. I hear it doesn't think in terms of any one human language, it builds its own, which it translates out in any language it's asked to. Perhaps this AI language could be our new lingua franca, in terms of which all our languages could be rendered. Maybe in that form we could compare them. Obviously, arriving at my account of how we evolved has involved quite wild speculation. What's the point of speculating like this? Obviously, it gets no support from today's scientific theory of how evolution works, the modern synthesis. But a field may be made richer by incorporating into itself an alternative theory for how things work. I think biologists used to draw on Lamarckism for that. My idea incorporates Lamarckism. Perhaps it could serve in its place. Dualism, saying mind can exist separate from matter, has fallen out of favor. Most authorities subscribe to material monism or physicalism, saying everything in the world is purely physical. They discard dualism because no one's been able to explain how mind and matter could interact. I can't explain that, but to me, it's just obvious from being able to experience consciousness that mind does exist. What's new in my version of dualism, evo-dualism, is seeing evolution capable of genuine novelty in the form of new kinds of living creatures and as the source of our minds. That is, for me, mind, like matter, is a given. Challenged to point to where mind interacts with matter, I point to the present moment as the worlds where mind and matter briefly overlap. I offer this not as a hypothesis, but as a discovery. This is a real phenomenon, a space in time where it may be possible for science to reach across and study mind in how living creatures evolve, for example. I see this moment of overlap between mind and matter as the great mystery that religions have been founded to account for. Now it is virgin territory for us to explore. That is the prospect I open up with evo-dualism. This prospect I explore further in a story in this channel, Children of the Genome, where I imagine humans continuing to evolve for thousands of years into the future. It's equivalent to watching a third video in this series. Consciousness 3. Try it. It may present you with an entirely new world of possibilities.